So I'll answer the questions sent in and then carry on with any other questions you might want to ask. Brahmavihāra, what was it like being in a cave for a year, and what prompted the decision to do so? Okay, so from January 7th, my birthday in 1985, until January the 7th, 1986, I spent a year in a completely black cave with no light at all. And I came out at night time once every, on the Uposta day, and had a bath in a stream, shaved my head, tended the patimokkha and returned. But other than that, just in complete darkness for a year. Except I had some candles. I light a candle for mealtime, and then I would have an afternoon period for reading for about half an hour. And then I used one other candle to make some hot water. So I had a stainless steel cup, and I made a stand and then put the candle in between the two elements here and the stainless steel. And then by the time the candle had extinguished, had hot water. I still think it was the most delicious drinks I ever had in my life. Because you can, when you're sort of like cold and in a cave, and then you feel the hot water and you can feel it go right down inside, and it's just that warm, only kind of warm feeling you ever have in the whole year. It's just this feeling of hot water go down, and it's really nice, really wonderful drink, hot water. So I'd been interested in living kind of like a hermit life since I was a teenager. I wanted to see what it was like. Also interested in whole research into sensory deprivation and what that was like. Wanted to try it, use myself as a guinea pig. And it's a chance to just devote myself to meditation many, many hours a day without interruption. So it's not usually possible to do this as a monk. In fact, the Buddha designed the Vinaya to prevent monks doing this because he wanted the monks to have daily contact with lay Buddhists. So the rules of discipline stipulate that you cannot store food overnight. So it means if you're a monk, you can't just get a sack full of food, like dry food, and then go off and live by yourself for a long time. Because any food you have to receive food between dawn and midday, and any food that's left over has to be given away. You can't keep it for tomorrow. And you're not allowed to cook, and you're not allowed to dig the earth and grow food, and you're not allowed even to take fruit off a tree or even to pick fruit up off the forest floor. So the Vinaya is designed to make sure that there is this relationship between the monastic Buddhists and the lay Buddhists. So as a general practice, this is not something the Buddha recommended, but this was like just a special opportunity for just 1 year out of a life. And it so happened in the monastery in Kanchanaburi, where I stayed, there were these caves which were very suitable for this kind of practice, and the abbot of the monastery wanted to support monks who were interested in this kind of extreme practice. So he guaranteed that the monks in the monastery would put one part of their alms food aside, and then they would have a rota and would take the food up into the cave. So to get into the cave, it's quite hairy, especially when it's raining, because there's like a sheer rock face, and you have to climb a bamboo ladder and then crawl in. There's a kind of a long entrance in, and then you're into the larger space, which is completely dark. And the monks did that for me for a whole year. I wasn't so disturbed about that, but the thing that I felt uncomfortable about was water. I don't think anybody realizes how much water weighs and how much water you get through in a week. And carrying these big cartons of water up a steep, like a bamboo ladder in the rain. It rains a lot in there, quite dangerous. And so I worked out a scheme where on the Patimokkha night, and the Patimokkha was also chanted in another cave. There's a very big cave, quite close to the one I was living in. And I would ask for, these big gallon drums of water to be brought and lined up. And so after the Patimokkha, it's usually about 10 p.m., I'd spend the next hour or two just carrying water up to the cave so that I wouldn't have to ask anyone else to bring the water up for me. So it was, it's a year in my life. It's just as difficult to summarize a whole year in anyone's life. It had its ups and downs, and some things were easier than I thought. Some things were a lot more difficult, and some real struggles. To use a lot of patient endurance. Because I entered the cave in January, which is the cold season. Caves are quite nice in the cold season. They're warmer than outside. But as the year wore on and the rain started to come in, the cave became more and more humid. But because it was just very gradual increase, I didn't really realize so much. But monks who'd come up who'd never been there before said, "How can you live? It's so damp." And I was used to it by then. But I couldn't leave any cloth out, like this robe or any cloth at all. I had to put in a plastic bag because just overnight it would have mold on it. It was that damp. One of the things that I learned during this year was how important yoga is, because I did yoga from when I was a teenager. So I was doing a lot of yoga every day. And so in what wasn't such a healthy environment, and very, very damp, and I have a weak lung, so it wasn't so good for my lung. But I was healthy the whole year through. I had no illnesses. The only close call came one day when the monks brought the food up. So very fortunately, I had a practice, because you're very hungry, so you're only eating one meal a day, and it's kind of cold and damp, and so when the monk came up and brought this bag of food for me, I would sit and just look at it for an hour before I ate it. And that was my daily practice, to see the feelings of greed and so on that come up in my mind, or this desire for food. So I'd been looking at this food for, I don't know, half an hour, and then suddenly there was a sound outside, and monk rushed into the cave. He was very agitated. He said, have you started eating yet? I said, no. He said one of the ladies made a mushroom soup, and they were poison mushrooms. I was afraid of going to find you dead. And I said, no, I'm still alive. I didn't eat the soup yet. So we threw the soup away. That was probably the most exciting event of the year. So, so that was a year in a cave. I've never wanted to live in a cave ever since. I haven't. What made you want to become a monk in Thailand? How do you deal with people you care of? Is that care for? Is that? I'm not sure. How do you deal with people you care of? I'm assuming that's care for. Okay, I'll answer it as if it's care for. Okay, why you want to become a monk in Thailand? I grew up in nominally Christian family, but really kind of secular family, and I never felt any connection with Christianity at all. It just seemed weird and unbelievable to me from when I was a small boy, really. So I never felt, I never gave up Christianity because I never really had any faith in it from the beginning. And I remember as a child what I particularly didn't like about it was this idea you have to be a Christian before you go to heaven. And I thought, well, what about all the people in other countries around the world? They're good people and they don't believe in Jesus. So they got to go to hell forever. And I said, well, if you're a teacher or a parent, I can see why you would punish somebody for a while, but, then you give them a second chance. But how could there be a God who's supposed to love you, love all the people of the world, but would condemn people for eternal hellfire simply because they never had the chance to become Christian? This is 7-year-old mind, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I grew up without any kind of interest in religion or Christianity, but as a child, I had asthma, so I missed school a lot, and that was good for me because I spent a lot more time studying than I would have done if I'd been at school with friends. And so I read a lot. I always loved to read, and books were my friend. And eventually, by the time I was in my teens, I had two questions in my mind. And one was, what's the best way to live your life as a human being? And the second one was, the world is so full of suffering and injustice and pain. And does it have to be like this? Or could it be better in some way than it is? And if it could be better, even a little bit better, then what's your responsibility as a human being to try to participate in making the world a better place? So those were the two kind of things I was really interested in, and read a lot of books and psychology and philosophy and so on. So I was a big reader. And then I came across teachings of the Buddha, and they made absolute sense to me. I can remember thinking, this isn't some kind of exotic Asian philosophy. This is just like elevated common sense. It's just so true. And so as an answer to the questions I was asking, the answers I found where I was first studying Buddhism was that there is a path to enlightenment, freedom, liberation, true happiness, and that is the highest thing, the best possible thing you could devote yourself to as a human being. And that made sense to me. And then teaching that the underlying all of the different kinds of suffering and injustice and so on and so forth are, the defilements in the human mind. Whatever the social system, the political system, the economic system, the constant, with all those changes and variety and diversity, underlying it all is defilement in human mind. So following the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, pursuing one's own liberation is also giving me the tools to be able to share that understanding with others. So one small part I could play in making the world a better place was pointing out to people how defilement creates suffering in their lives and in their families and communities, and sharing the methods that the Buddha revealed that could help to alleviate that suffering. So that's what I really sort of felt, Buddhism is the path for me. But I was also teenager, want some adventure and excitement and experience in my life. So I decided I wanted to go to India, because I'd always been fascinated with India since I was small. And I wanted to go in a way that was really challenging. And so I worked. I told you yesterday I worked in a warehouse and on a building site, saved some money. And then I set off for India and went overland through Belgium and Germany and Austria, Yugoslavia, Greece, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way to India. And so in India I spent a year altogether, half of which I spent traveling around and visiting different spiritual centers, and sometimes just kind of tio, just walking, going trekking and doing all those kinds of things. And then the second half of the time I spent looking for places to meditate, quiet places, and learning about spiritual development. So it was almost 2 years before I returned to England, and not quite sure where to go from there. I knew I didn't want to go to university anymore, and that was kind of difficult thing to tell my father particularly. He has, because in my family come from quite poor background, and nobody in my family on either side, mother or father, had ever been to university. And I'd always been top of my class, and I was put a year ahead of so I was always studying with children who were older than me. And so my father had great hopes for me as an academic. So difficult for me to tell him that I wasn't going to follow that path. And then I enrolled in a meditation course with a Vipassana teacher, an English guy who had established a community in Kent, in southeast England. And it was a group of young people who'd all been traveling in the East and practicing meditation. And they come together and they were all looking for good livelihoods, like working in care homes and social services and teaching and making their livelihood in wholesome ways, and then having regular morning and evening meditation sessions together and holding retreats. So I attended one of these retreats, and the teacher been a monk in Thailand for 6 or 7 years. And so when he gave a discourse in the evening, he would often tell stories about his time as a monk in Thailand. And that was, well, that's exactly what I'm looking for. This the way of life in which I can realize my life goals, the things that are most important to me. And I was very keen to become a monk in Thailand, in a Buddhist country, and to be a part of a Buddhist culture rather than to become a Buddhist monk in a Western country. And so all those things led me to Thailand, and I arrived in late 1978 and been here ever since. I'm still not sure about the second question here. Maybe someone can either ask or write it down again. How do you deal with people you care of? Is this, are you talking about me, or is this a genuine, let's take it as a general question, okay? How you deal with people you care for, meaning family, friends, loved ones, and so on. I think the really important quality here is empathy, isn't it? The ability just to put down all your own views and opinions and perceptions and ideas and try and look at the world, or look at some dispute or some conflict through the eyes of the other person, and try to understand how they see things. And it's often the case that when you have difference of views, you tend to think, I'm right, they're wrong, I'm smart, they're stupid, how can they be so deluded, how could they possibly think that, how could they be so out of touch, how could they look at me like that? So I have all these kinds of things going on in your mind. So give people the benefit of the doubt. So that means that you follow principle innocent until proved guilty. That even if people have very different opinions to you, people that are close to you, then they give them you pay them that respect, that they have good reasons in their eyes for the views and the beliefs that they have. So to avoid any kind of too much conflict, rather than say it's two people quarreling, you come together as, rather than me against you, it's like, how can we deal with this problem? So it's like two sides of a conflict are trying to find a resolution together, rather than one side trying to have a victory over the other. So this is the, it's the case, isn't it? The people that we have the most kind of passionate, difficult conversations with, the most other people that we love the most. And that's because we have the most expectation and the most, their views, their beliefs, their perceptions of us are most important to us, so we're most sensitive. And if living in a family or in a relationship, then people close to you know exactly what buttons to press when they want to evoke an emotional response. But even in the absence of some conflict, just generally trying to see things through others' eyes, and they obviously won't always see things in the same way. But the basis, I would say, underlying how we relate to people around us, we call the 4 Brahmavihāras: metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. So this is a really important point to understand in the Buddhist teaching, that you can never just take one one thing, one defilement or one virtue, and just talk about that in isolation. And this is why we find most of the Buddha's teachings are like groups of defilement. So you have the hindrances to meditation. There's 5 hindrances. There's 4 noble truths. There's 3 of this. That's not just, as a technique to help people remember the teachings more easily, but it's because of the organic relationship between these different qualities. So this point is not understood. By every now and again you get like scholars and people that say, well, look, let's make a new religion or a new, like a universal religion. We'll take a bit from there and a bit from there and a bit, and then we'll all the things that people can agree on and put them all together. That just doesn't work, because you can't just sort of put all these things together and shuffle the pack. From Buddhist point of view, you have to understand the connections between different states, positive and mental states. In the case of the 4 Brahmaviharas, then you have metta, which is that general wish for other people to be happy, for all beings to be happy. And you have karuna, which is the wish for people to be free from suffering. So if you see someone suffering and in pain, then karuna will come to the fore. Generally, in the absence of some obvious suffering, then it will be metta. But the third one, mudita, and that's more of a difficult one for many people. It's developing the faculty and the ability to rejoice in the happiness and success of other people. And if you can do that, it's just such a source of joy in your life. Of course, one person, how much success can you have? How many good things can you do? Not so many. So if your joy is only going to come from what you do individually, then that's pretty restricted. But if you can open up and rejoice in all the good things that other people do as well, it's limitless, isn't it? You have an endless source of joy just looking around you. So this, I'm not talking about like positive thinking and trying to look everything in a good way, because that's really artificial and I don't think it's very sincere. But if you just open your eyes to all the small acts of kindness and goodness going on around you all the time, in terms of the effect on your mental health and your inner happiness and joy, it's quite astounding. And one of the changes that take place as you follow the Buddha's path, and if you meditate regularly, you become more and more sensitive to goodness. You notice it more, you appreciate it more, and it brings you a lot of joy in your life, as I said. So mudita is really important one to develop, and going against those feelings of jealousy and inadequacy and replacing them with this appreciative joy. But the 4th one is it's kind of like an outlier. It's equanimity. So many people wouldn't even think of that as an emotion, would they? Because when you think of emotion, you think of something sort of outgoing. But equanimity is that sense of balance and kind of solid unshakability of mind. And that's without that one, the other 3 are never really developed so much. It's like a neutral gear. Let's say you're going into positive, you want to help someone to be happy. Because if you have a desire to be someone happy, it's going to lead to you acting and doing things. If you really sincerely feel compassion, that's going to lead you to, it's not just sitting there with your eyes closed thinking, may all people be happy. I mean, inevitably, if you start thinking that way, it's going to express itself in the way you relate to people around you. But there are many occasions, aren't there, where maybe you want to help people be happy, or they're unhappy, they're suffering, and you want to help them, but you can't do it. Maybe they're quite happy with what they're doing. They think they're right, or they don't trust you, or you just lack the kind of communication skills to be able to really explain to them or to help them in the right way. So on many occasions, the situation is just not ready for that person to change and to find happiness or free themselves from suffering. So what do? Where do you put your heart? Where do you put your mind when you see someone you feel so sorry for them and you really want to help them and you're ready to, and they don't want you to help them? So you just sort of write them off and say, okay, I did my best and goodbye. No, you come to equanimity, and equanimity is you accept, well, this is how it is right now. It's like this. The situation is like this. All the causes and conditions are like this. But I'm here, and if things change and I can help and I can do something in the future, then I will. But right now, I can't. So I'm not just going to sit there and feel miserable about it or feel I'm hopeless or be sad and depressed and say, well, no. Then my mind shifts to upekkha, into balance mode. And this is in all of the groups of the good qualities, there's always one quality as like the representative of wisdom. So it's not always called panya or wisdom, but it's in the wisdom family. And in the positive emotions, upekkha is the wisdom in the wisdom family. But it's the key emotion. So you can see very easily the dangers when you lack upekkha. When you see this with parents, now parents just have a natural, sort of instinctive, strong wish for their children to be happy, and find it almost unbearable for their children to be unhappy. You ask 9 out of 10 parents when their children are suffering, if you could take on your child's suffering for them, would you do it? 9 out of 10 parents would say yes. That's just part of being a parent. That's just something that is just a natural thing. But that strong love and concern and compassion, because it often lacks upekkha, can lead to very misguided parenting. Because parents find the suffering of their children unbearable, they don't allow children to explore the world and to learn from experience and to develop self-reliance and these very important qualities in the long term. If you're too focused on present moment, your child or someone you love wants something, you want to give it to them. Oh, they're so happy, or they're unhappy and they're crying or they're upset, and you just want that to go away as quickly as you can, whatever you can do. But that's not necessarily the best thing for that person, is it? Because that thing they want may not be a good thing at all, long term. Or that thing that they dislike, we know from having lived in the world longer and have more experience, it's a good thing, long term. So the parent or the person who's wanting to help another person has to be able to have that equanimity and be there even though the person you love or you care for is disappointed or angry, upset. You have to be willing to be patient with that. And you need that upekkha because you know that what you're doing is in the best interests of that person. So developing these 4 Brahmaviharas, this is the way that we develop more healthy relationships and help to take care of the people around us. It's not, someone asks for something, you should give it, and you're a good child, you just do what your mum and dad says. That's not gatanyu gataveti. That's not what Buddha taught. Because if your parents are wanting you to do something which is immoral, let's say your parents are heavy gamblers, and they want to take you along to the casino, learn how to gamble, so should you go? Would it be like bad or bad karma not to go? I would say no, quite the opposite. Because not going would be more helpful to your parents in the long run, certainly to you. So, we have a sense of Boon Kun for poor me, for parents, but that has to be seen with Boon Kun of the Buddha. And we should realize that the Boon Kun of the Buddha trumps it's more important than Boon Kun of parents. So Boon Kun of parents is really important to recognize that, understand it, but it's not. It doesn't mean being aware of the debt of gratitude you owe to your parents, that you just have to do everything they say and be completely obedient. That's a misunderstanding. And the Buddha said, if you really want to repay the debt to your parents, there's 4 things. It's like if your parents lack faith and confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and you have some way of influencing them such that they gain more faith, or if they don't keep precepts and in some way you play a part in them taking precepts more seriously, or if they're kind of selfish and possessive and you can encourage them to be more generous, or if they don't really have a wisdom to understand themselves and their life, again, you can play a part. So it's not teaching your parents, but playing a part in some way in them developing these 4 qualities of sattha, seen, jhaka, and panya. So those 4 qualities are the qualities of a sotapanna. So it means like the most thing you can do to help another person in the world is to set them further along the path to stream entry, become sotapanna. And the 4 contributory factors there are faith and sila and generosity and wisdom. Okay. ตอบยาวเลย I always have a bad dream. What can I do? Well, first cause of bad dream, basic, fundamental, is eating the wrong thing before you go to bed. Don't eat cheese before you go to bed. Sometimes, this has come from the Buddha himself, talking about dreams. This isn't me, okay? The Buddha said this. He says one cause of bad dreams is indigestion. Generally speaking, it's a good idea not to eat too much your main meal in the evening. If you can adjust your schedule and have your main meal in the middle of the day, and in the evening something lighter, that's very good for health, generally, and also help with bad dreams. Another cause of bad dreams is you have worries, concerns, problems in your life, and you're not really facing up to them, and you're not learning how to allow them to come up and let them go. So teaching in the meditation practice, so you repress. And in daily life, there's so much going on. You can keep busy all the time, can't you? You know, you're just doing this, doing that, watching this, watching that. You can get your telephone and go on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And so basically you can run away from yourself all your waking hours. The only time you can't run away from yourself is when you're asleep. And then these things will come up, you know. So this is one cause of bad dreams. So in terms of dealing with it, apart from being aware of what you're eating in the evening, not suffering indigestion, is really make a point of making the last half hour or so before you go to sleep really wholesome, to do some little bit of chanting, a bit of meditation, some sharing of merit, spreading metta, and just putting your mind in a really good wholesome state before you go to bed. I would like to ask, what does the hand position of the Buddha statue in the meditation room mean? ท่านเป็นมหาท่านมีความรู้ This is what they call the first desana. So this commemorates the teaching, the first teaching that the Buddha gave. Was really the Buddha became like the full-on Buddha when he gave his first teaching. Before that, the Dhamma was just in the Buddha's heart. But in the first teaching, then he shares the teaching with other sentient beings, and as a result, one of the 5 ascetics who was listening to the talk realized the stream entry. So this is what took place on the Asalaha Puja, on the full moon of July. And so on that day, it's the first teaching of the Buddha, first time the Dhamma had been expressed as a verbal teaching, and it was the beginning of the monastic order. So very special occasion. And this mudra expresses symbolizes the teaching of the Dhamma, the Pathom Tesana. So there are many of these. If you're interested, a good place to go is to Wat Benja in Bangkok, because they have huge number of Buddhas, each one with a different hand gesture. And you can find books, and you can find online the explanation. They all have different meanings. So often you'll see one like this, where the Buddha's like this, where the Buddha's touching the earth. This is calling the earth as his witness in the battle against Mara. And they have some really, it's called the subduing Mara. So Mara meaning all the evil forces. So the Buddha is subduing Mara in this posture. Okay, so I've run out of questions. Does anyone else have anything they like to ask? This will be the last English session. Yes.
I have my personal curiosity since I was in school, since I saw you in M1, since M6 in Panyapatip. So I mean, I never saw you like having, always saw you smile. So it's kind of like my personal curiosity about like, are you really have the emotion like a general human sort of? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's why not? Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Oh, I'll tell you something that gets me really annoyed. Shall I tell you what that? It doesn't sound like much. It's when people pronounce Cho Chang as Shor Shi. Like go to Chiang Mai. I really regret that Chiang Mai has disappeared forever. Now it's Chiang Mai. And check your luggage in Chiang Mai. And I really like the CH sound, Cho Chang sound, and I'm really sad that it's disappearing from Thailand more quickly than the elephants. And so you see, my lay name before I became a monk is Sean Chiverton. So when I came, Thai people couldn't pronounce, or Islam people certainly couldn't pronounce SH, sh. And so Luang Por gave me my name, like nickname is Chon, like spoon. So he called me Spoon. And I say Chon. And then over the years, because influence of like Luke Krung, singers and so on, then Chan became Shan, and so that sound is now disappearing, or has disappeared. And so the problem I have with it is, it's not that, language changes all the time. Okay, so if people in a certain country want to change a pronunciation of a letter, then that's perfectly all right. But the problem is the assumption that you can do that when you're speaking English, and so now pronunciation of English has got much worse because people are pronouncing Chah in English as sh. So my name, like Sean Chiverton, now Thai would pronounce Sean Chiverton and make no distinction between CH and SH. So SH means Shiva, like the sun. So it's changed my name forever. Now I come from Shiva family. It's like... So yeah, this is the kind of things that get me emotional. No, I mean, as you practice more, the mind becomes more and more stable and cool. Nancy. Yes, crew on is yes. อังกฤษก็หายไปแล้วเหลือแต่อังกฤษเสียดาย
How did you first meet Chah, and could you tell us more about the experience?
Sure, yeah. So before I came to Thailand, a friend, a Buddhist friend of mine, said, there are some Western monks from Thailand in London, and they're looking for a place to build a monastery. Why don't you go and because you've never been to Thailand, you don't know anybody, why don't you go and ask for some advice from them where to go? And so at that time, Ajahn Sumedho, who was Ajahn Chah's senior disciple, with about 3 or 4 other monks, were living in a townhouse in the middle of London on Haverstock Hill, which is just between Chalk Farm and Hampstead Heath, if anybody knows that part of London. It's like a very busy road, and it's a nice place. But I ended up staying a few days and eventually becoming a pakao, like wearing white and spending the rains retreat in England with Ajahn Sumedho and his group. And so I heard a lot about Ajahn Chah during that, so I'm really inspired. And I arrived in Bangkok, in Don Mueang, and my plan was I didn't bring any money with me because I thought, if I sort of chicken out or it's too tough, I won't have any choice. I just have to stay. So don't want to give myself any way of getting back to England. So, but I just had, I don't know, a few hundred baht or whatever, and Don Mueang in those days was just in the middle of rice fields. You couldn't see Bangkok from Don Mueang. So where's Bangkok? I didn't even know. And we went out to the main road and I caught a bus. I just assumed that would be going into Bangkok. And it was certainly after a long trip and it was so hot. And then on this bus with no air conditioning or anything. And eventually got off at the Victory Monument. And someone in England said you should go to Wat Benjamin Bopit. And I went, so I walked to Wat Benjamin Bopit, and then they wouldn't let me stay. So I had one other address written down on this piece of paper. It's called Wat Bovonives. And they said, what Bovonives? And where's that? So I start asking people. He was like, do you know what Bovonives? And so, eventually I thought, it's just really just so completely exhausted, and I thought I'm just going to have to take a taxi. So I gave him this piece, what Bawaniwet? And so they took me to Wat Bawan, and there was an Indonesian monk who let me stay underneath his kuti. And so while I was at Wat Bawan, I was speaking with some of the monks there, and they said, before you go to stay with Luang Chah, you should go and visit one or two other monasteries. You might. So I got persuaded, and I went to stay with Ajahn Mahabua for a few days, about 10 days. And so it was very inspiring, but then I still felt, no, I still want to be Ajahn Chah disciple. So I caught a bus from Udon, came all the way down the Mekong River and came to Ubon. And again, I didn't know I didn't speak a word of Thai in those days. And so I thought, just take just chua parami. So I just got on a bus, because it's this really nice pink bus. I thought, what a cool bus. So I got on this bus, and it took me right to Warin Chamrap, and on the outskirts of Warin Chamrap. And from there, I got the directions to go to Wat Papong, Ajahn Chah's monastery. So I was walking along the road. In those days, there's hardly any traffic. And this car came from the other. So that's unusual, like a rotgeng, like soon car. And there was these three young women in it. And they said, where are you going? They spoke English. I said, going to Wat Papong. They said, oh, we'll take you. So they like Tivada. ไอ้สุคิดปรุงแต่งเป็นมนุษย์หรือเป็นเทวดากันแน่ So they took me to Wat Papong, and then it was the Upusta day, and I met an Australian monk, and so he took me to his kuti and he shaved my head for me, and then we went to pay respect to Ajahn Chah. So and he was sitting underneath his kuti talking with some monks. And so the Australian monk introduced me. He said, "This is Sean. I was wearing white, so keeping 8 precepts. His disciple came from Ajahn Sumedho. He wants to come and ordain here." And Ajahn Chah was drinking some herbal honey drink, and he saw me and so I crawled in, and he gave me his drink, and that's it. That was like, this is my teacher. I don't want to go anywhere else. So I think that the thing that's really special about teachers like that is they don't seem special. They just seem like completely ordinary. And normal. And it's like you feel that you're abnormal. This is what a normal human being should be like, and then everyone else is kind of like weird. Yeah. So, and just a complete unshakable, like a force of nature. Just like if you were to go to the Himalayas, or you see Niagara Falls, or you just see something which is completely natural and just what it is, nothing else. That's like meeting someone like Ajahn Chah. So see, in the beginning, he didn't speak any other language. He didn't speak English, but you don't really need that much like content, because, as I say, I'd read a lot of books, and most of the Westerners, we read a lot of books already. But it's just having someone who's an example, and you feel, yeah, this is possible. There is such a thing as arahant in the world, and it's somebody in this day and age can follow the Buddha's teaching and realize the highest results. And so having him there as an example, and someone who just embodies the Dhamma. It's not so you don't have necessarily to teach the Dhamma. It's like you are the Dhamma. He is the Dhamma. So that's what's really inspiring. Rather than he's telling you all these wise things every day. So, you like me? Anything else?
Namaskar,ท่านอาจารย์ครับ I just wanted to get your thoughts on people who study abroad and kind of developing a more Western lifestyle, and then when they come back here, kind of distinguishing between the two lifestyles. I've been abroad since 11, and I feel like I live kind of two completely different lifestyles or lives, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish between one another.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's such a thing as a Western lifestyle and a Thai lifestyle that can be compared, because it depends on social level and whether you live in the city or whether you live in the countryside, and the particular kind of family that you live in, how close they are, and because families in the West tend to be a lot more loose and not so much expected of each other. But America is it's like an outlier. It's a very unique country. I mean, because of the influence of Western culture, that this tendency to think that they are the leaders or the standard, overlook just how weird a place America is, really. I mean, compared with any other country. So some years ago, there's a real big storm in social science circles, because they realized that many of the most important theories and studies in social science over the past and made a really serious mistake in assuming that you could just take students off university campuses in America and ask some questions or get them to be involved, and then deduce from that all these statements about human nature. When in fact, university students in America are actually quite different from university students in other countries. And this idea that what's true for us is true for everyone, this is kind of like classic Western arrogance, isn't it? So they started to redo all the most key studies and experiments in social science in different countries around the world. And then they did a sort of I don't know what you call it, like a graph where you let's say from America is like, say, extreme individualism, and then say you have, say, the other end of the spectrum, you'd have like North Korea, which is exactly the opposite. So America, rather than being in the middle as sort of like an average human being is an American, they're way out on one end of the spectrum. And so there's all kinds of interesting aspects to this. One study was to show landscape paintings to American students and Japanese students. And so what American student says, oh, here's this guy or this girl, this woman, and they're this, and then in the background there's, so their focus is immediately on the foreground. Whereas Japanese students, they say, well, there's a mountains and there's a lake and so on, and then in the front there's some people. So the Asian or the Japanese is to see the context and the relationships rather than the person who's standing at the front, the hero or the heroine. So there are a lot of really fundamental cultural differences between America and Britain, let alone America and Thailand. And that's just, I think that's part of the study. You try to learn from where you are and what's underlying the way people do things. I think the important thing is not to say that one's right and one's wrong. That societies come up with different answers to the challenges that they have, and those can be conditioned by things like geography, for instance. I mean, America, has a particular psychology because, it's so isolated from the rest of the world. It's a world in itself. Whereas in Europe, everyone's very aware. You've got all these different countries and different languages all around you. You can't be that kind of, you can't think you're really special or different in the way that you can when you're isolated in the way that America is. So the question is not so easy to answer, but I think that whatever the cultural forms are, there are certain kind of underlying values. And this is why I've been talking about, we really need to kind of identify our values. Just what are we doing in this world? What's you pua arai? So because once you have some values, the things that you feel are most important in your life, then you can say, well, in how does what I've experienced in America relate to my values? What are those things in America that I've really learned that are in harmony with my values? And what are the things that maybe oppose my values? And same back in Thailand. But for sure, you have to adapt, and finding a way to adapt without seeming insensitive or that and they don't know, and just having that kind of kindness and patience. And you've learned things in the West, and some things you can adapt and apply here in Thailand and make Thailand a better place. There's lots of huge problems here, and there's lots of lessons to be learned from the West and applied in your life here. But there are certain things that you will have to let go of a bit and just go with the flow a little bit, and that's so. Obviously, as a Buddhist monk, I think you should come back to teachings of the Buddha, and they'll give you your anchor and help you to deal with the changes and the challenges of adapting to.
Could you share some of the best pieces of advice you received over the years that has influenced you?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I can't hear.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Could you share some of the best pieces of advice that influence you today?
Best pieces of advice, goodness. I have to sit and think about it. The first thing that comes to my mind was my father. When I was a boy, he always say, it takes all sorts to make a world. So the world's so very diverse. You can't expect everyone to be the same as you. There are all kinds of different people, different values, different religions, and you should respect everyone. So that was something my father taught me. And second one he taught me is, if you're going to do something, then do it well. Whatever you do, put your heart into it and do it well. And then afterwards, actually, I disagree with him on this one, because I see so many people who actually limit themselves because they don't want to do anything that they're not good at, because they're afraid people will laugh at them, or they don't want to be a failure or a loser. But if you really want to grow in life, you should be willing to do things you're not good at and make mistakes. So, be willing to make mistakes and learn from them. That would be a piece of advice. Obviously the Buddha's teaching to develop the Eightfold Path. That's the most kind of formative one. For monk's life, this isn't so much advice, but something that I always like is like, mak ngai dai yak, lambak dai di. When I first in Thailand, that was one of the first sort of little phrases I learning Thai. And Ajahn Chah would teach monks, nor noi, gin noi, put noi, Sam Korn. Goodness, I received so much good advice in my life. So, it's just a few for you.